The fluorescent lights of St. Mary's Hospital buzzed overhead as a crowd of nurses, patients, and visitors gathered in stunned silence. Karen Mitchell's weathered hand gripped 16-year-old Marcus Thompson's arm with surprising force, her security badge glinting under the harsh medical lighting. "I caught him red-handed," she announced loudly, her voice echoing through the pediatric ward corridor. "This boy was stealing supplies from the storage room." Marcus felt his heart hammering against his ribs as dozens of eyes turned toward him. The plastic bag in his free hand crinkled softly, containing the get-well balloons, chocolate chip cookies, and grape juice he'd bought from the hospital gift shop for his little sister Zoe. The receipt was still warm in his pocket, but Karen hadn't given him a chance to explain before dragging him into the hallway like a common criminal. "Ma'am, please let go of me," Marcus said quietly, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. At 16, he stood nearly 6 feet tall, but something about this woman's aggressive stance made him feel small and vulnerable. "I can show you my receipt. I bought these things for my sister." Karen's pale blue eyes narrowed behind her wire-rimmed glasses. "Don't lie to me. Boy, I've been working security in this hospital for 12 years, and I know a thief when I see one." Her grip tightened, and Marcus winced. "What's a kid like you doing wandering around the pediatric ward anyway? You don't belong here." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. "A kid like you." He understood perfectly what she meant, and the understanding made his stomach twist with familiar nausea. It was the same look he'd gotten from store clerks who followed him down aisles, from teachers who assumed he was the troublemaker before learning his name, from neighbors who clutched their purses tighter when he walked past. Dr. Patricia Williams, a young resident with kind eyes, stepped forward from the growing crowd. "Karen, maybe we should calm down and—" "Stay out of this, Patricia," Karen snapped, not taking her eyes off Marcus. "I'm handling a security situation here." This boy was coming out of the supply closet with a bag full of stolen merchandise. "That's not true," Marcus protested, his voice growing stronger. "I was visiting my sister in room 314. She just had her appendix out yesterday, and I brought her some things to cheer her up." He held up the bag, and the colorful balloons inside bobbed gently. "Everything in here came from the gift shop downstairs." Karen's laugh was harsh and disbelieving. "Sure it did. And I suppose Mommy gave you her credit card to go shopping." Her voice dripped with sarcasm, and several people in the crowd shifted uncomfortably. "Let me guess, single mom. Works 3 jobs. Can't keep track of where her kids are." The casual cruelty of her assumptions struck Marcus like lightning. His mother, Dr. Sarah Thompson, was currently in surgery 3 floors down, saving someone's life with her skilled hands. His father, Dr. James Thompson, was making rounds in this very ward, probably checking on post-operative patients. Both of his parents had earned their medical degrees through years of sacrifice and determination, building successful careers while raising their children with love and discipline. But Marcus had learned early in life that explaining his family's accomplishments to people like Karen was pointless. They had already decided who he was the moment they saw his brown skin, his athletic build, his casual jeans and basketball shoes. To them, he would always be a threat first, a human being second. "Please, just let me show you the receipt," Marcus said again, reaching slowly toward his pocket. "I paid for everything with my own money." Karen's hand shot out and grabbed his wrist. "Don't you dare reach for anything," she shouted, her voice echoing off the hospital walls. "For all I know, you've got a weapon in there." A collective gasp rose from the watching crowd. Even in the sterile environment of the hospital, the tension was becoming palpable. Marcus felt heat rushing to his face, a mixture of embarrassment and growing anger. "I don't have a weapon," he said through gritted teeth. "I'm 16 years old, and I'm visiting my sick sister. That's all." Save it for the police, Karen said, pulling out her radio with her free hand. This is Mitchell in pediatrics. I need backup for a theft in progress. Suspect is a black male, approximately 16 years old, 6 feet tall, appears to be armed. I am not armed. Marcus's voice cracked with frustration and fear. The lies were building on top of each other, creating a narrative that could destroy his life. He thought of his sister Zoe, probably wondering why he was taking so long to visit her. He thought of his parents, who had worked so hard to give their children opportunities they'd never had. And he thought of every black parent who had ever sat their child down for the talk about how to survive encounters like this one. Dr. Williams stepped closer, her voice gentle but firm. Karen, I think there's been a misunderstanding. This young man clearly bought those items from the gift shop. Look at the balloons, they have the hospital's logo on them. He could have stolen those too, Karen insisted, her face flushed with stubborn determination. These people are clever. They know how to make themselves look innocent. These people. The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud, and Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest. There it was, the truth underneath all the accusations about theft and trespassing. This wasn't about stolen supplies or security protocols. This was about the color of his skin and the assumptions that came with it. Ma'am, Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying a dignity that surprised even himself. I understand you're trying to do your job, but you're wrong about me. I'm not a thief. I'm not armed. And I'm not whatever you think I am. I'm just a brother who loves his little sister and wanted to bring her something to make her smile. For a moment, something flickered in Karen's eyes, perhaps a shadow of doubt, or maybe just surprise at his eloquence. But it vanished quickly, replaced by hardened resolve. Save the sob story, she said. Hospital security is here. 2 uniformed security guards rounded the corner, their radios crackling with static. Marcus's heart sank as he recognized the look in their eyes, the same mixture of suspicion and assumed guilt he'd seen too many times before. Officer Rodriguez, a middle-aged man with graying temples, approached with his hand resting on his belt. What's the situation, Karen? Rodriguez asked, his eyes never leaving Marcus. Caught him coming out of the supply closet with a bag full of stolen merchandise, Karen reported, her voice full of self-importance. When I confronted him, he became aggressive and reached for something in his pocket. Could be a weapon. Marcus opened his mouth to protest, but Rodriguez held up a hand. Son, I need you to keep your hands where I can see them and step against the wall. The corridor seemed to spin around Marcus as the full weight of the situation crashed over him. This was really happening. He was about to be searched, possibly arrested, in front of dozens of witnesses, including sick children and their families. The injustice of it burned in his throat like acid. Officer, please, Dr. Williams interjected, stepping between Marcus and the security guards. I think there's been a terrible mistake. This young man has a receipt for everything in that bag. He bought it all from our gift shop. Rodriguez looked between Dr. Williams and Karen, clearly torn between conflicting accounts. Ma'am, I appreciate your concern, but I need to follow protocol. Karen called in a theft, so I have to investigate. Then investigate properly, Dr. Williams said, her voice growing firmer. Check the gift shop security cameras. Call down and verify that someone matching this young man's description made a purchase in the last hour. Don't just assume he's guilty. Karen's face reddened with anger. Patricia, you're being naive. I've been working security longer than you've been practicing medicine. I know how to spot trouble. Trouble, Marcus repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. Is that what I am to you? Trouble. The question hung in the air, And for the first time since the confrontation began, the corridor fell completely silent. Even the constant hum of medical equipment seemed muted. Marcus looked around at the faces surrounding him, some curious, some sympathetic, some carefully neutral. But all of them were watching, waiting to see what would happen to the black boy who had dared to exist in their space. "Look," Marcus said, his voice stronger now. "I know what this looks like to you. I know what you see when you look at me. But I'm not your enemy. I'm not a criminal. I'm a straight-A student at Lincoln High School. I volunteer at the community center every weekend. I tutor kids in math and English. And right now, I just want to see my little sister who's scared and hurting in room 314. Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably, but Karen's expression remained stone cold. "Pretty words don't change facts," she said. "And the fact is, you were somewhere you didn't belong. With merchandise you can't account for—" "I can account for it." Marcus's composure finally cracked, his voice rising with frustration. "The receipt is in my pocket." The gift shop clerk's name was Maria, and she complimented me on being such a caring brother. "There are cameras down there that will show me paying for everything." "Calm down, son," Rodriguez said, his hand moving closer to his radio. "Getting upset isn't going to help your case." The unfairness of it nearly broke Marcus's heart. He was supposed to stay calm while being falsely accused. He was supposed to be polite while his character was assassinated. He was supposed to smile and cooperate while grown adults treated him like a dangerous criminal. The weight of those expectations, passed down through generations of black parents who had learned to survive in hostile environments, pressed down on his shoulders like a physical burden. "I am calm," Marcus said, forcing his voice back to a steady whisper. "I'm just trying to understand why nobody wants to check my story before deciding I'm guilty." "Dr. Williams pulled out her phone. "I'm calling down to the gift shop right now to verify his story." "Don't waste your time," Karen said dismissively. "His accomplices probably worked there. These operations are more sophisticated than you think." Marcus stared at her in disbelief. She had managed to turn his simple act of buying gifts for his sister into an elaborate criminal conspiracy. There was no evidence too weak, no explanation too far-fetched, if it supported her predetermined conclusion about his guilt. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "what would it take for you to believe I'm telling the truth?" Karen's answer was swift and cold. "Nothing. I know what I saw." The words hit Marcus like a slap. This wasn't about evidence or facts or truth. This was about something deeper and more painful. The reflexive assumption that his black skin made him inherently criminal, inherently dangerous, inherently unworthy of basic human dignity. Karen had judged and convicted him the moment she saw him, and no amount of proof would change her mind. "Dr. Williams finished her phone call and looked up with grim satisfaction. "Maria, at the gift shop, confirms it. A young black man matching this description purchased balloons, cookies, and juice about an hour ago. Paid with cash and was very polite." The crowd murmured with relief and indignation, but Karen's expression didn't change. "That doesn't prove anything," she said stubbornly. "He could have shoplifted other items while he was down there." Rodriguez looked increasingly uncomfortable. "Karen, maybe we should—" "No," Karen interrupted, her voice rising. "I'm not backing down. I saw what I saw. And I'm filing a report. This boy is trouble. And mark my words, we'll be seeing him again." Marcus felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes, but he blinked them back. He would not cry in front of these people. He would not give Karen the satisfaction of seeing him break. But inside, something was crumbling, a faith in fairness he hadn't even realized he still possessed. The elevator at the end of the corridor chimed softly, and the doors slid open. Dr. James Thompson stepped out, his surgical scrubs still damp with perspiration. his face weary from a long operation. He was a tall, distinguished man in his late 40s, with graying temples and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. As the chief of pediatric surgery at St. Mary's, he commanded respect from everyone in the hospital. Marcus felt his heart leap with relief and shame. Relief that his father was here. Shame that he needed rescuing at all. Dr. Thompson's eyes swept over the crowd, taking in the tense faces, the security guards, and finally settling on his son, pressed against the wall with his hands visible. "What's going on here, Doctor?" Thompson asked, his voice carrying the quiet authority that came with years of making life-and-death decisions. Karen stepped forward eagerly, apparently not recognizing the hospital's chief pediatric surgeon. "Sir, this is a security matter. We've apprehended a shoplifter and are conducting an investigation." "Doctor," Thompson's gaze moved slowly from Karen to Marcus, and his expression changed. The professional composure remained, but underneath it, Marcus could see the quiet fury of a father watching his child being humiliated. "A shoplifter, Doctor," Thompson repeated, his voice dangerously calm. "And what? Exactly. Did this alleged shoplifter steal hospital supplies?" Karen said confidently. "I caught him coming out of the storage room with a bag full of merchandise." "I see." Dr. Thompson stepped closer to Marcus, his presence immediately comforting. "And has anyone examined this alleged stolen merchandise?" Rodriguez cleared his throat nervously. "Well, sir, we've verified that some of the items came from the gift shop." "Some of the items," Dr. Thompson repeated. "Officer, may I see what's in the bag?" Marcus held out the plastic bag, and his father examined its contents with the methodical precision of a surgeon. Get-well balloons with the hospital logo, a package of cookies from the gift shop downstairs, a bottle of grape juice with the hospital gift shop price tag still attached. "Doctor," Thompson looked up at Karen with raised eyebrows. "These are hospital supplies?" he asked mildly. Karen's face flushed red. "He was in the supply closet when I found him." "Actually," Dr. Williams interjected, "I saw him coming out of room 314. He was visiting a patient." Dr. Thompson nodded slowly. "Room 314. That would be Zoe Thompson, the 8-year-old who had an appendectomy yesterday." He paused, letting the significance of the name sink in. "My daughter." The corridor erupted in whispers and gasps. Karen's face went pale as the implications crashed over her. She had just accused the chief pediatric surgeon's son of theft, called him a criminal, and demanded his arrest, all while he was bringing gifts to his recovering sister. "Your son," Rodriguez said weakly, his hand moving away from his belt. "Dr. Thompson, I had no idea." "Why would you?" Dr. Thompson asked, his voice still calm but with an edge of steel. "After all, what difference should it make whose son he is? Shouldn't every child be treated with basic dignity and respect, regardless of their parentage?" The question hung in the air like an indictment. Marcus felt a surge of pride in his father, who had cut straight to the heart of the matter. It shouldn't have taken his father's arrival to end this humiliation. The fact that it did revealed everything that was wrong with the situation. Karen tried to recover, her voice shaking slightly. "Dr. Thompson, I was just doing my job. I saw someone who looked suspicious, and suspicious." Dr. Thompson interrupted. "Tell me, what exactly looked suspicious about a teenage boy carrying balloons and cookies to visit his sister?" Karen's mouth opened and closed, like a fish gasping for air. She couldn't say what had really looked suspicious to her. Marcus's race, his age, his presence in a space she felt he didn't belong in. To voice those thoughts would be to admit the ugly truth about her motivations. I made a mistake," she finally whispered. "Yes, Doctor, Thompson agreed. You did. You made the mistake of looking at my son and seeing a criminal instead of a child. You made the mistake of assuming guilt instead of innocence. And you made the mistake of treating him with cruelty instead of compassion. Marcus watched his father's controlled anger with amazement. Doctor, James Thompson was not a man given to outbursts or dramatics. He was measured, thoughtful, diplomatic. But watching his son be humiliated had awakened something fierce and protective in him. Dr. Thompson, Rodriguez said nervously, we'll certainly be reviewing our procedures to make sure this doesn't happen again. Will you, Doctor? Thompson asked. Because I have a feeling this isn't the first time Karen has made these kinds of mistakes. Is it? Karen. Karen's silence was answer enough. Several people in the crowd exchanged meaningful glances, as if they were remembering other incidents, other assumptions, other young black visitors who had been treated with suspicion rather than welcome. I want to see her personnel file. Doctor, Thompson continued. I want to review every complaint, every incident report, every time she's exercised her authority inappropriately. And I want answers about why someone with such obvious bias is in a position of power over vulnerable patients and their families. Sir, with all due respect, Karen said, finding her voice again. You're overreacting. This was a simple misunderstanding. Overreacting, Dr. Thompson's voice rose for the first time, and the corridor fell silent. Karen, you grabbed my son. You accused him of crimes he didn't commit. You called him a liar when he tried to show you proof of his innocence. You humiliated him in front of dozens of witnesses. You made him feel like a criminal for the simple act of loving his sister. Each word hit like a hammer blow, and Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. His father understood. He saw the real damage that had been done, beyond the mere inconvenience or embarrassment. The assault on dignity, the attack on character, the casual cruelty of assumptions based on nothing but skin color. And you want to call that a simple misunderstanding? Doctor, Thompson continued, if this is how you treat the children in this hospital, then you have no business working here. Doctor, William stepped forward, her face set with determination. Doctor, Thompson is right. I've seen Karen's behavior before, the way she watches certain visitors more closely than others, the way she assumes guilt based on appearance rather than evidence. This needs to be addressed. Other voices joined in, staff members and visitors who had witnessed the confrontation or remembered similar incidents. The truth was spilling out like water through a broken dam, and Karen's face grew paler with each accusation. I've been doing this job for 12 years, Karen said defensively. I've kept this hospital safe. Safe from what, Dr. Thompson asked? From children visiting their siblings, from teenagers bringing flowers to their grandmothers, from black families seeking medical care. The words landed like physical blows, and Karen staggered backward. I'm not racist. I treat everyone the same. Do you, Dr. Thompson pulled out his phone. Then you won't mind if I call down to the gift shop and ask Maria about the young white boy who was shoplifting last week. The one you let go with a warning instead of calling security. Karen's face crumpled. There had been no young white boy. But her reaction revealed the truth of her double standards. She knew, on some level, that she applied different rules to different people, that her assumptions about danger and criminality were filtered through the lens of race and class. Marcus watched the confrontation with a mixture of vindication and sadness. This was justice, of a sort, but it couldn't undo the humiliation he'd suffered. It couldn't erase the memory of being grabbed and accused, of being treated like a threat in a place where his parents worked to save lives. Dad, Marcus said quietly, the first word he'd spoken since his father's arrival. "Can we just go see Zoe now?" "Doctor..." Thompson's expression softened as he looked at his son. "Of course, son. But first, I want to make sure this never happens to you or anyone else again." He turned to Rodriguez, who was looking increasingly uncomfortable. "Officer, I'll be filing a formal complaint about this incident with hospital administration, the security company, and, if necessary, the police department. Karen's behavior today was not just unprofessional, it was potentially criminal." "Criminal?" Karen gasped. "What are you talking about?" "Assault." "Doctor," Thompson said calmly. "False imprisonment. Violation of civil rights. The security cameras recorded everything. And I'm sure the footage will make interesting viewing for the appropriate authorities." The mention of security cameras sent a visible shudder through Karen. She had been so focused on playing the role of the heroic security guard that she'd forgotten the electronic eyes that watched every corner of the hospital. There would be video evidence of her grabbing Marcus, of her refusal to listen to reason, of her escalating aggression in the face of his calm denials. "Dr. Thompson," Rodriguez said desperately, "I'm sure we can handle this internally. There's no need to involve outside authorities." "Isn't there, Doctor?" Thompson asked. "Because it seems to me that your internal handling has been inadequate up to this point. How many other children has Karen terrorized while you looked the other way?" The question hung in the air unanswered, but the implications were clear. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a pattern, a system that allowed people like Karen to exercise their biases with impunity until they finally targeted someone with the power to fight back. "Doctor..." Williams stepped closer to Marcus, her voice gentle. "Marcus, I want you to know that not everyone here feels the way Karen does. Most of us were horrified by what we witnessed today." Marcus looked around at the faces surrounding him: nurses, doctors, patients, visitors. Some looked guilty, as if they were ashamed of their silence during his ordeal. Others looked angry, directed not at him, but at Karen and the system that had allowed this to happen. A few children pressed their faces to doorways, wide-eyed at the drama unfolding in their normally quiet ward. "Thank you," Marcus said to Dr. Williams. "But I don't need apologies from people who did nothing wrong. I need change. I need to know that the next black kid who visits his sister won't go through what I just went through." His words carried a maturity that surprised even his father. At 16, Marcus had been forced to confront adult realities about prejudice and injustice, and he was handling it with a grace that many adults never achieve. "You'll have that change, Dr. Thompson promised. "I'm going to make sure of it." Karen made one last desperate attempt to salvage her position. "Dr. Thompson, please. I've worked here for 12 years. I have a family, a mortgage. I made a mistake, but I can learn from it. Please don't destroy my career over one incident. Dr. Thompson looked at her for a long moment, and Marcus could see the conflict in his father's eyes. The doctor was a man who believed in redemption, in second chances, in the possibility that people could change. But he was also a father who had watched his son be humiliated and degraded. "Karen," Dr. Thompson said finally, "if this were truly one incident, I might be inclined toward mercy, but we both know it's not. This is who you are, and who you've always been. The only difference is that today, you targeted the wrong family." The truth of his words was undeniable. Karen's shoulders sagged in defeat, and Marcus felt a strange mixture of sympathy and satisfaction. She was a victim of her own prejudices, trapped by beliefs that had ultimately destroyed her career. But she was also responsible for the pain she had caused not just to him, but to all the others who had suffered under her biased assumptions. "Come on, son." "Doctor," Thompson said, placing a protective arm around Marcus's shoulders. "Let's go see your sister. She's been asking for you." As they walked down the corridor toward room 314, Marcus could hear the murmur of voices behind them, staff members discussing what they had witnessed. Visitors sharing their own stories of discrimination. Security guards questioning procedures they had always taken for granted. The incident had opened a door that couldn't be closed again, forcing an uncomfortable examination of assumptions and biases. "Dad," Marcus said quietly as they walked, "do you think anything will really change, Doctor?" Thompson considered the question carefully. "Change is hard, son. It requires people to admit they were wrong, to confront uncomfortable truths about themselves and their institutions. But what happened today, it's going to have consequences." They paused outside Zoe's room, and Marcus could see his 8-year-old sister through the window, looking small and fragile in the hospital bed. She brightened immediately when she saw them, her face lighting up despite the IV tube in her hand. "What took you so long, Marcus?" Zoe asked as they entered the room. "I was starting to think you forgot about me." Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Never," he said, pulling out the balloons and cookies. "I just had to take care of something first." As he arranged the balloons around Zoe's bed and opened the package of cookies, Marcus tried to push the confrontation out of his mind. This was what mattered: family. Love. The simple act of being there for each other. But he knew that what had happened in the corridor would stay with him, would shape how he saw the world and his place in it. "Doctor." Thompson excused himself to make some phone calls, and Marcus knew he was following through on his promises. Within hours, the hospital security footage would be reviewed, Karen's employment would be terminated, and new policies would be drafted to prevent similar incidents. The machinery of accountability would grind into motion, slowly but inevitably. But beyond the institutional changes, something more significant had occurred. Marcus had stood up for himself with dignity and grace under impossible circumstances. He had refused to be broken by hatred and prejudice. And in doing so, he had shown everyone watching that the content of his character was far more important than the color of his skin. 3 days later, Marcus was back at school when his phone buzzed with a text from his father. "Check the news," the message read, followed by a link to a local television station's website. The headline made Marcus's stomach flip: "Hospital security guard fired after racially profiling doctor's son." The story had somehow leaked to the media, complete with security footage and witness testimonies. Karen's face filled the screen as she was escorted from the hospital by police officers, her career and reputation in ruins. The story went viral within hours. "Justice for Marcus" began trending on social media, with thousands of people sharing their own experiences of racial profiling and discrimination. The hospital was flooded with calls from reporters, activists, and ordinary citizens demanding accountability. Marcus watched the coverage with mixed feelings. Part of him was gratified to see justice served so publicly and decisively. Karen's actions had consequences, and those consequences were playing out for the world to see. But another part of him felt uncomfortable with the attention, with being turned into a symbol, rather than simply being allowed to be a teenager who loved his sister. The story took on a life of its own. Community leaders organized protests outside the hospital, demanding not just Karen's termination, but comprehensive reform of security policies. Civil rights organizations offered to represent Marcus in potential lawsuits. Politicians issued statements calling for investigations into discriminatory practices in healthcare settings. Through it all, Dr. Thompson remained focused on the larger issues. He used his platform as a respected physician to speak out about the systemic nature of racial bias, the way it affected not just individual encounters, but entire communities access to healthcare. He turned his son's painful experience into a teachable moment for society. Marcus found himself invited to speak at schools, community centers, and youth organizations about his experience. At first, he was reluctant to relive the trauma, but he gradually realized that his story had power. The power to change minds, to open eyes, to prevent other young people from facing similar humiliation. "I'm not a hero," he would tell audiences. "I'm just a kid who was in the wrong place at the wrong time. In the eyes of someone who couldn't see past my skin color. But if my story helps one person question their assumptions, if it prevents one other child from being treated like a criminal, then maybe something good can come from something bad." The hospital, meanwhile, underwent significant changes. New sensitivity training was implemented for all staff members. Security protocols were revised to emphasize de-escalation and respect for all visitors. A patient advocate position was created specifically to address concerns about discriminatory treatment. Karen, for her part, disappeared from public view after her termination. There were reports that she had entered counseling, that she was struggling to find new employment, that she had finally begun to confront the biases that had shaped her worldview. Marcus sometimes wondered about her, whether she had learned anything from the experience or simply blamed others for her downfall. 6 months after the incident, Marcus was walking through the same hospital corridor where he had been humiliated. Zoe was back for a routine follow-up appointment, and the balloons he carried this time were for her continuing recovery rather than comfort during illness. The new security guards nodded respectfully as he passed, their training evident in their professional demeanor. A plaque on the wall caught his attention, a new mission statement that explicitly committed the hospital to treating all visitors with dignity and respect, regardless of race, age, or background. "Look, Marcus," Zoe said, pointing to the plaque. "They put up new rules because of what happened to you." Marcus nodded, feeling a complex mixture of pride and sadness. Change had come, but it had required his humiliation to spark it. He wondered how many other young people had suffered in silence before his story gave them a voice. Dr. Williams appeared around the corner, her face brightening when she saw them. "Marcus, how are you doing?" "I'm good, Dr. Williams. Thanks for everything you did that day." "I should have done more," she said regretfully. "I should have intervened sooner, spoken up louder. But I've learned from that experience too." Her words reminded Marcus that change wasn't just about punishing those who acted badly. It was also about empowering those who wanted to act better. The incident had affected everyone who witnessed it, forcing them to examine their own responses to injustice and their responsibilities as human beings. As they walked toward Zoe's appointment, Marcus reflected on how much had changed in just 6 months. The hospital was different, his family was stronger, and he had found his voice as an advocate for justice. But perhaps, most importantly, he had learned that he didn't have to be defined by other people's prejudices, that his character, his actions, and his values were more powerful than their assumptions. The corridor that had once been a place of humiliation had become a symbol of transformation. Children of all races now walked freely through the halls, visiting their loved ones without fear of harassment or discrimination. And somewhere in the pediatric ward, another family was receiving the compassionate care that every family deserved. Marcus knew that his story was just one of many, that the fight against prejudice and discrimination was far from over. But he also knew that change was possible, that individual courage could spark institutional transformation, and that sometimes the most powerful response to hatred was simply refusing to be broken by it. As he helped Zoe into the examination room, Marcus smiled at the thought of all the other brothers and sisters, sons and daughters, who would walk these halls in the future. They would face their own challenges, their own struggles, their own moments of testing, but they would do so in a place that had been changed, however slightly, by one teenager's refusal to accept injustice as inevitable. And in that change, in that small victory over prejudice and fear, lay the seeds of a better future for all.